I am beyond words right now because I am absolutely thrilled to be here in Yorkshire at the exquisite Castle Howard. I actually can't believe I'm here. When I married into the British aristocracy, it was the start of a wonderfully exciting journey, but it was also a little daunting. I became a Viscountess, and for an American girl from a small town outside Chicago, that was quite a shock.
I live with my husband Luke, heir to the Earl of Sandwich, and our family at Mapperton House in Dorset.
Living in a place like this is a joy, but also a challenge. And every day we're aware that we're preserving a very special part of Britain's heritage. Mapperton has opened up an extraordinary new world for me, and I can't wait to share it with you all.
So if you love castles and manors and stately homes as much as I do, please join this American Viscountess as I journey into the British countryside in search of some of Britain's finest historic houses.
Welcome to the drawing room here at Mapperton. And it's not only the American Viscountess filming that takes place here. Over the years, Mapperton has featured as the location for films, including Far From the Madding Crowd, starring Carey Mulligan, and more recently, Rebecca with Lily James. So many historic houses are more than happy to invite cameras in, as it's sort of like the golden ticket. The income almost always enables vital repairs and renovations to be carried out. The spectacular Castle Howard in North Yorkshire was largely saved in the 1980s when it featured in the TV drama series Brideshead Revisited, and has since appeared in numerous films, including a favorite of mine, the Netflix series Bridgerton. Castle Howard has been home to the Howard family since it was built over 300 years ago. And I was more than a little excited when I visited and met Nick and Vicky Howard.
Hello.
Hello! Oh my goodness. So nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you.
So
Hello.
nice to meet you.
This is Poppy.
Poppy. Wonderful. Hello, Poppy. So nice to meet you. This is incredible.
You've not been
you
here
know
before.
This. You've heard this a million times.
Yeah,
but I'm going to say it again and again.
I still feel it every day.
I mean, the view.
Yes. The only thing is you haven't brought the sunshine, but anyway.
Well, it's all right. It's England.
It's England, exactly.
it's
It's North
England.
Yorkshire, very North Yorkshire.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
No.
Come
Our
in.
pleasure.
Yes,
Come in.
Perfect,
Yes.
perfect. Thank you, thank
Come,
you.
Pops.
It took over 100 years to build Castle Howard. It was commissioned by Charles Howard, the third Earl of Carlisle, at the end of the 17th century. He then chose John Vanbrugh as his architect, and Castle Howard would become the epitome of the English Baroque style. The scale of the building is astonishing, and I know all too well what it takes to maintain and preserve these historic houses. This room is lovely.
This is sort of our sitting room, really. Though
Yeah.
we do use it for some business things, but it's primarily the private part of the house.
Well,
yes.
thank you for having me here. I feel honored. The views.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Well, it's called the lake sitting room, and you can see why it's called the lake sitting room. And
If you get an evening where the sky is beautifully orange, it goes on reflecting in those ponds through, because there's actually about 12-foot difference in height between the nearest pond and the lake itself. So it goes down like that, so you keep getting reflection coming back again.
No, it's magical.
Fantastic. And you redecorated this room, is that
Yeah,
right?
we redecorated this room, yeah. And really, it was one of the very earliest rooms to be built. So this room was literally built in about 1701 or something.
Right.
Although it wasn't exactly this form.
No, funnily enough, it was 2 rooms, and at some stage, probably in the 18th century or early 19th century, they took a wall out there.
Right.
Because there was a staircase down there.
It's so fascinating, you know, I had to see the sort of development of, but it's been like this for a long time. It's been like this for a very long time, yeah.
But when you were growing up here, what's your memory of this room?
Well, this was my parents' sitting room as well, the lake sitting room.
And it was called the lake sitting room. And heaven forbid, I occasionally have called it the drawing room, and he gets so cross. It's not the drawing room, it's the lake sitting room.
Well, that's because
All
the drawing
it's
room
the
is
lake
through
sitting
there.
room.
It's what we call the Gold Library now. It's all very confusing. And the names of rooms in this house have changed constantly throughout time.
Right.
I mean, and because I grew up here, of course, I tend to slightly hang on to the names from that period. But there's no reason why they shouldn't go on changing.
The two of you've taken, you know, this extraordinary palace on, if you like. I mean, this is world renowned here. Everybody knows about Castle Howard. And do you feel an enormous sort of burden in one sense to leave your legacy? I mean, I know that that's kind of how I feel a little bit.
Well, there's a huge conservation challenge here. I mean, one of the features of Castle Howard is it's not just the palace, as it were, it's all the other buildings, which is what makes it special. And they are all more than 300 years old.
Right.
And there are a lot of problems. A lot of the buildings were built with iron cramps in them, which they thought was a good idea in the early 18th century. As soon as water comes in, you have a problem because they rust and they expand and they break the stone. So there is a lot to do.
Yes.
And so it's a challenge, yeah. It is a big challenge.
As far as prioritizing the list, if you like, and I know that can change, you know, up and down. It can go up and down, and then things constantly get added to it. But would you say right now what is several, because I know it's a big list, of big projects that you want to see completed?
It's a very good question. I mean, obviously we want to tackle things which are deteriorating very fast because it might be too late if we leave them.
Right.
And there is that sort of stitch in time element of conservation. But we also want to do projects that could potentially produce income.
Yes.
So have a sort of sustainability. And we've made life even more complicated for ourselves in that both Nick and I are quite interested in nature. So we're actually not just looking at the built heritage, we're also looking at the natural heritage and, you know, what we're doing on the wider estate in terms of biodiversity and everything. So we have made the list rather long, actually.
But I think it's absolutely right because, I mean, with buildings it's very easy to see the decay that's gone on. You can't to quite the same extent see the decay that's happened to the countryside over the past, particularly the past 70 years. But we know it's there.
Well, we know the butterfly population
is
depleted and so many populations are depleted. So that is quite a passion for us, is to restore the natural environment as well. Yeah. But they go hand in hand, actually, and we've got to do both.
These historic houses here in the UK in particular are set within, you know, an estate. Yeah. And now we are looking at ways that we can increase.
And of course, in the past, that estate produced the income to keep the house, and those estates don't actually produce enough to support the house. So you have to, you know, find other ways of supporting the house.
So not only do we open up the house to the public, but then we have events,
filming, and all of that. Exactly.
And you're constantly trying to evolve in as the homeowner, but with new ideas. The country house in Britain changed forever during the 20th century. It's said that in 1955, one house was demolished every 5 days. Therefore, historic homeowners were forced to be creative and innovative, with many opening the doors of their manors, castles, and stately homes to the public. These owners did all they could to save these buildings for the future. Historic Houses, the association, which now represents more than 1,400 privately owned houses across the UK, has noted that some 21 million visits were made to these properties last year alone. And that's after the challenges of the recent history, the COVID pandemic, when once again, we all needed to think outside the box. We were able to take on, I think, the pandemic, as hard and difficult as it was, we were forced to find new ways.
Well, it's amazing how much that often does change the course of things.
Yes.
All the big houses now open for Christmas.
Yes.
And Christmas is an incredibly important part financially of our year. But really, the sort of whole business of opening for Christmas was an accident because there was a foot and mouth outbreak, and Chatsworth decided, because they'd lost so much over the year because of the foot and mouth,
they had to close,
that they would try opening at Christmas and see what happened. And they were inundated with people, and everyone went, ooh, we might try that. But you know, this whole business of kind of you talked about legacy, we talked about looking after the place. It goes back to the meaning of the word heritage, really, which is, I mean, I bang on about this, but if you look heritage up in a decent dictionary, you'll find that it means what has been or may be inherited. And because, as custodians, you know, we're kind of on the fulcrum of that definition. If we don't look forward as well as backwards, then eventually it's going to implode. The whole thing. You have to keep innovating. You have to keep finding new ways of doing things. You have to find new streams of income. You have to find new people to come and see you.
Yes. And new audiences, exactly. Very important.
Experience the past like never before with History Hit's award-winning original documentaries and ad-free podcasts with our expert historians like Dan Snow, Susanna Lipscomb, Lucy Worsley, Mary Beard, Tristan Hughes, and myself, Matt Lewis. Sign up for an exclusive discount using the link in the description and embark on your historical journey from the wonders of ancient Egypt and the life of Anne Boleyn to the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte and the discovery of Shackleton's endurance. Get history wherever, whenever, exclusively on History Hit.
On the 9th of November 1940, fire savaged the central and southeastern wing of Castle Howard. The destruction is still evident today as the recovery continues. But this moment also beckoned in an era of finding new ways of rebuilding the past. Dr. Christopher Ridgway, curator at Castle Howard for 40 years, explained more. So, Dr. Chris, tell me about where we are now, because this is quite...
This is the center of the house. It's the Great Hall with the crowning dome on top, which is the great architectural signature about Castle Howard. This is the second version, if you like. I mean, the original one built in 1699, but lost in 1940, and then Nick Howard's father, George Howard, rebuilt the dome in 1960.
Wow, incredible. So with the dome being lost for 20 years, how many other rooms were lost in the house, the castle?
That terrible morning on the 9th of November 1940, you've got a tally of about 20 rooms that are destroyed on 3 levels, basement, principal and upper. Sections of the roof and the dome. And to date, we have restored fully, really fully, 4 of those rooms. The central block has been re-roofed and obviously the dome rebuilt. There's been consolidation work in the interiors, but there is more to do, which will be done.
So that was going to be my next question. Will those rooms that haven't been finished, and of course this is time and lots of money and time and lots of money, and I can say that over and over again, but for those remaining about 16 rooms, there is a plan for them to eventually be
There
rebuilt.
is. We've got one downstairs which we're on the cusp of kind of restoring as to an early 18th century drawing room.
Fantastic.
We have other areas that require much, much more work and have different options about what we do with them, and I can show you that when we go into the older burnt out wing.
Wow, I mean, that fire in November 1940 was brutal. It's almost hard to fathom how the magnificent central dome was lost and 20 rooms destroyed.
This is the shell of the High South. So High South comprised this central saloon with 2-bedroom suites either side. And these were so prestigious that this is where Queen Victoria and Prince Albert stayed when they visited in 1850.
Oh
and
my goodness.
The walls in here, this section, were decorated with these frescoes by Antonio Pellegrini, who also decorated the walls of the hall and the underside of the dome. Of course, all incinerated in 1940. So what you have is the bare stone remains.
The bare stone remains, incredible. I can see, though, why Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were staying here, because this sensational
view this way, sensational view that way, south over the grounds and then to the villages beyond.
So how did the fire start? That's always intriguing. We hear about these fires in these country houses quite a bit.
Competing stories, because during the Second World War, a girls' school had been evacuated to Castle Howard. Very common that buildings like this were requisitioned for different purposes. So a girls' school was here. Actually, it was a chimney fire. Chimneys had probably been not as well maintained, and that's what was the likely cause of it. There are some competing stories about an electrical fault, which may or may not have been the case. There's colourful kind of versions that the girls, in a fit of St. Trinian's-like kind of irresponsibility, burnt the house down. Afraid that's not true. No, it's much more prosaic, and chimney fires are kind of unbelievably common in country house fires.
Yes, they are.
Effectively started in the southeast wing. There was a wind blowing that sort of fanned the flames into the centre of the building.
Where we are today. I guess for me, with living in a historic house myself, many times when you have these fires and they are so significant, you almost think of just giving up. Because the rebuild is so costly.
The rebuild is horrific. I mean, it's daunting. Here you have to layer in another very difficult factor. This is in the middle of the war, and of the 3 sons in the family, 2 are to die in the war. So Nick's father, who is the middle son, returns from the Far East, never expecting to inherit Castle Howard. He does, but it's partially wrecked. And as you say, a lot of people would have said no.
Yes, right.
But the girls' school stayed here for a few more years. There were attempts for them to try and buy the building, but Nick's father makes the decision at the end of the 1940s that he wants to move back in, to be his family home. He will raise his family here. And then, really crucially, in 1952, he makes this decision amongst the vanguard of country house owners to open to the public in the way that we understand it today.
Yeah.
So this is a great survivor. I mean, that's the great thing. It's both the house and the family are joint survivors, and they both need each other.
Yeah.
As we explored the area of the house which had been consumed by the fire, we reached the rooms which are being saved for future generations.
This is the room that is on the cusp of being restored back to a tapestry drawing room and recreate a historic interior here. Big challenge, got to find a new fireplace, build a new fireplace. It's in keeping with that early 18th century feel for this room. We have the tapestries which are being restored at the moment, so that's great, but we've got to put all the panelling back into the room.
Yes, you have to go. So can I ask about the tapestries? When the fire happened in here, were the tapestries completely destroyed?
No. What happened here, that this room had gone, so many rooms have gone through different iterations over time. So at the time of the fire, the tapestries were not in this room. And at the time of the fire, because the girls' school was here, fortunately, a lot of stuff was away in store. Having said that, quite a lot of stuff wasn't. Big fixtures like heavy mirrors and sculptures couldn't be moved, and fixture paintings, all of those perished in the fire. I mean, a long list of paintings lost, really tragic.
Yes,
but there have been survivors and losses, and it's a question of kind of putting back together what we can and recreating this room. And so that means you will have an uninterrupted suite of rooms here. At the moment, you come from that room, which is recreated after the fire, to this shell back to the historic interiors. So we'll remove this kind of hiatus and put it back with the rest of the house.
How fantastic. So again, you just spoke about the room in front of me, that was recreated after the fire.
That was recreated in a very special way. It was rebuilt, the shell was rebuilt for the set for Brideshead Revisited by Granada TV.
Oh my goodness. So this, again, just so in my mind's eye, this room very much looked like this.
Exactly like that.
So TV comes in,
TV comes in, late 70s, films Brideshead here for us, a really, significant moment in the history of Castle Howard.
Yes.
Catapults us to global fame.
Yes. So this is an opportunity for these historic houses to be the location, the set, and that of course was a new way of bringing in income to support.
Income and fame and reputation. And clearly Brideshead is very important because the story of Brideshead is a love affair with a house. And it's a house in the novel that has a dome, so we fit the bill. And Evelyn Waugh did visit Castle Howard in the 30s. He didn't have Castle Howard explicitly in mind as a model for Brideshead, but architecturally in all sorts of ways there are affinities between fictional and real building.
So this room, I'm just curious, when they decided to restore this room, why was that? Why this room? Because of the view out to there?
It's because you've got the view back into the Great Hall, you've got the view and the steps down into the gardens. And you've got, for a TV company, you've got the best of both worlds. You've got, as it were, an authentic set all around you, but you've got a shell in which you can build your own set.
Yes.
And this is largely what it looked like in the production, except these murals were then replaced. So in the TV version, this is where Jeremy Irons is executing his murals for the Marchmain family. Those are replaced by these pictures commissioned from the New Zealand artist Felix Kelly by Nick's father, George Howard, post-production. So this doesn't recreate anything that was like here before. This is a new iteration of this room, post-fire, late 20th century, in keeping with the fact that this house is organic. It evolves all the time.
That's right. Even before Brideshead Revisited was first broadcast in 1981, Castle Howard had played its part in many, many productions, and that continues to this day. Vicky Howard showed me a room which is featured on screen more than once.
We're going into a bedroom that's called the Archbishop's bedroom.
Right.
And God knows why it's called the Archbishop's bedroom, just been called that forever.
It's one of those names, I know, that nobody really understands why, but it's stuck. Beautiful.
So obviously there's been a huge amount of filming at Castle Howard, and it's a very important extra income stream for us. It also, of course, widens our reach of visitors. It's a great marketing tool as well.
Absolutely.
But the most famous of all is Brideshead.
Right.
So this was the bed that very famously Lord Marchmain, played by Sir Laurence Olivier, died in.
Oh my goodness.
And the bed was actually rehung for Brideshead. These are the all new silks and things that Brideshead put up for the filming in this room.
Fantastic.
And so this, for sort of film buffs, is very important. But then it had a second life recently, in that it was in Bridgerton, in the first series of Bridgerton.
Yes.
And it's the bed that the marriage of the Duke and Daphne was consummated in.
That's
so there were many, many scenes filmed all night in this bed. But anyway, so this bed has quite a lot of film history attached to it.
Quite a lot of action. I mean, listen, I recognize this bed because I've seen both.
Okay, yeah.
So, so I feel a little bit of an affinity with this bed. But also, the bed itself, the four-poster bed, is absolutely exquisite.
Yeah,
so what's the history? I mean, it's beautifully...
Well, for some reason, I mean, there's gorgeous painting. I mean, you see, it's absolutely beautifully done. For some reason, we've got a lot of these. They call them Polonaise beds. I'm not quite sure why. But anyway, they're very sort of French, actually, in style. At some stage, someone put in an order for a lot of them, I think.
Right.
Kind of, you know.
Again, the importance of having TV, film.
Yeah. Hugely important.
Bridgerton, I mean, wonderful.
Yeah.
Because
well, a surprise too. I mean, we didn't really realise how big it was going to be. But I do think it was very well done, actually. I think it was refreshing. Suddenly this came along and it was fun and different.
Yeah. It was brilliant. There's Poppy, look at... Oh. The income from these blockbuster film projects is absolutely vital for the ongoing repairs and restoration needed to preserve these historic houses. Vicky took me to a room she has recently redecorated, which will itself be put to work to replenish the coffers.
This is the Admiral's room, and we have very recently redecorated this, and the reason that we redecorated it was this fabric, which is an Indienne fabric, which we have reproduced the pattern from one that was in our archive, which we know was here in the 19th century. And so we've done a collection of fabrics. This is the Castle Howard Indienne. So we needed to showcase it.
Yes, of course.
So we redecorated the room in order to showcase
it's fantastic. So if I wanted to redecorate a room at Mapperton, I could
you can now buy. You can actually buy. I mean, what's quite interesting is you can sort of see actually with the curtains maybe even more. It's big scale, this, which is, of course, for this house, perfect.
Yeah. When you decided to sort of choose this room to redecorate, was it in desperate need of redecoration?
We didn't terribly like the decoration that was in here, so
right.
that sort of helped. We'd been longing for an excuse to redecorate it. Obviously, as you know, decorating these rooms is always, phenomenally expensive, but this was quite simple. I mean, actually, as you see, we've just put we've just painted the panelling. It's got a slightly early feel with the panelling. Yeah. So painting was kind of suitable. And then, of course, we've got this rather wonderful rush matting. Now, this is, and I don't know if you can smell it, because actually, it's got all these herbs in it. And it's literally stitched. They're literally sections that are stitched together. And it's very suitable. The house was started to be built right at the end, literally at the cusp of the 17th and 18th century. And this, I think, has quite a sort of late 17th century feel with the panelling and the rush matting. So it's got a sort of slightly early style. Right. Most of the house is a little, more 18th century, but we thought it was quite nice to do one of the rooms as it would have been in the very sort of early bit of build, because the house took 100 years to build. So.
Yes. Yes.
Just to show you through to the bathroom. The bathroom has the most amazing view. Of course, the shutters are shut, which doesn't help.
Wow.
But it's got one of the best views in the house.
Is this open to the public?
Well, it's not open to the public, though we do private tours.
Right.
And we're doing particularly ones on decoration. But actually, we are hoping a sort of new business model to have paying guests. So we are actually looking to use some of the rooms for sort of very upmarket B&B.
Yeah. Well, of course, absolutely.
And so this obviously with its nice bathroom and everything works very well. It's a room to let. Castle Howard was built to be seen. It was not built as a little private house.
Right.
It was built as a show-off house.
Yes.
But it was, and they actually extended the gatehouse, which you probably drove through, to turn it into a guest house. And because they had so many people coming to see the new Castle Howard, they needed more accommodation to put people up. So, these houses were always teeming with people and people coming to see it and everything.
Well, lovely. This is absolutely beautiful, and you've done such a marvelous job. Now, I do have to ask, you've finished this room. What's next?
Well, there are even bigger projects next. So there was a terrible fire here during the Second World War, which gutted hugely important rooms. And those are slowly, very slowly being returned to their former glory.
I feel like I'm one of the first. Am I one of the first in this room?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you are, yes.
Yeah, feeling a little bit special. Thank you, Vicky. Castle Howard has risen like a phoenix from the ashes. So much has been restored over the past 80 years or so. But Dr. Chris Ridgway promised to show me a hidden area which was ravaged by the fire and is still to be restored. Dr. Chris, this is, I mean, on the one hand, incredible to see this, but on the other hand, you can't help but feeling sort of a bit of sadness, you know.
You are here. I mean, this is the basement of the southeast wing of the house. So this is the area in which the fire broke out in 1940 and then swept through into the body of the house. And so you go into these rooms here. Now these would have been...
Yeah, what would these rooms have been?
These were domestics rooms in the 19th century. So this was the housekeeper's room originally.
Okay.
And then through there you've even got the butler's pantry. So that would have been the silver safe.
Oh,
so
yes.
the great big iron door would have protected the interior. That's why those ceramic tiles are actually still unscathed by the fire.
And was the silver in there?
Not in the time of the war,
Right,
no. But
right.
very often in houses
Yes.
that did catch fire, the silver survived because it was in the strong room. That
Right.
was able to kind of
of course.
protect it. Yeah,
Of course.
so.
Just walking through here, this fire was so extensive.
Very extensive, yeah. I mean, this is just the basement level.
So these were domestic rooms and used during the fire, used?
Well, the whole of the building had been institutionalized by the school during the
Yes.
fire. So I don't think these were classrooms or dormitories as such, but they would have been maybe for storage areas or things like that. And here, for example, in this space, up there is roughly where the fire began. Now you can't tell that from now because a lot of things have lost, and it was somewhere around there that the chimney flue was that started the fire. And that's not there today. You've got this cavernous shell, some post-fire consolidation with brickwork and concrete lintels just to stabilise the structure, stop it falling down.
Yes.
And this wooden staircase is just for when we briefly had this open as a sort of standalone exhibition wing. But more to do in this area, not least of all with the roof, because the roof is still a temporary roof.
I can see that. I've just spotted that. It is a temporary
So you're never going to do anything until you've got a solid roof on top.
Right. And these windows right here, are they temporary windows, structures?
They are windows that were put in post-fire. So actually, immediately after the fire, all the windows have been burnt out, the glass shattered.
Right.
So those new sash windows in the 40s, 50s would have gone in just to kind of, again, protect the area from the elements. But in time, those are going to have to be replaced properly. Yeah,
of course.
and nothing here really is kind of permanent in the sense that we've got to sort of start from scratch when we come to redoing this area.
Yes.
And not least of all this end room, which is again another cavernous space.
Oh, look at this. Oh my goodness, and the light is fantastic.
I think for me this is one of the most poignant spaces because the floor which is lost that reveals the room above, known as the Little Cabinet. This east-facing room, so beautiful morning light in here, decorated ceiling, all lost. No, I mean, as tragic as the other historic interiors lost, but there's something particularly gaunt about this spectacle here today. And again, as a space, I think because its connection with the outside and the gardens, maybe there are kind of possibilities in here temporarily, but it's part of that list of things to do. I think the crucial thing to realise is that since the fire, we have spent an awful lot of money and time on restoring the house, the structures in the gardens. I mean, if you add it up in today's values, we've probably spent £40 million over the years.
Right.
You look at what's outstanding, that's another 50, 60 million.
Yes.
But you know what? We've accomplished that much.
Right.
It's the old glass half empty, half full.
Right. But it's also being able to, I think, continue to tell the story, because this project, as you said, is, this fire happened in 1940. We're now in 2023, and it's been, as you said, 40 million pounds or whatever been spent to get to where you've got to today.
You might look at this space and you think this is dead. Actually, this is a living house. It's all the time, it's evolving, it's moving forward, it's not standing still, it's not crumbling. It takes an awful lot of effort, dedication and money to do that. But the wherewithal, the will is there. That's the critical thing.
Yes. For me, I think Castle Howard, of course, it's famous. I'm going to use that word. It is world renowned. But what's extraordinary about coming here is that as a visitor, each time I come, I'm going to see something different if I come every year. And it's not just a new exhibition. I can start to see really how the house is evolving because of the fire, with these ongoing projects all of the time.
The fire presents you with a whole lot of opportunities. Of course, there are massive challenges, but there are opportunities to restore and refresh the building, refresh the stories, the narratives, because this is a building that's a story house as much as a treasure house.
Yes.
And it kind of confirms that evolutionary dynamic, so that rooms are not necessarily put back to how they were before. The irony being that the more you restore, the less of the fire is visible, but it's always going to be part of our story.
Yes.
And yes, you're right, come back in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, we might have restored this bit. And that's happened in my time here. The lakes have been all restored and recovered, other parts of the estate, other parts of the building.
It's the stories that can be told. So the next project is this. We're working on this. We're with the architects, and even sharing that story that this will be completely transformed in 2 years' time, 5 years' time.
Exactly.
Come back.
There's an endless story to be told about it.
It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Castle Howard has been home to the Howard family since it was built over 300 years ago. Its beautifully theatrical design was the vision of architects John Vanbrugh and Nicholas Hawksmoor at the turn of the 18th century. It wasn't only the house that was center stage, the surrounding landscape took on a leading role too. About a mile from Castle Howard itself stands the Mausoleum, designed by architect Nicholas Hawksmoor in the 1720s.
The Mausoleum. The Mausoleum. It is rather a magnificent building, isn't it? One of the things I love about it is that from a distance away it looks quite a manageable size. The closer you get to it, the more you realise that it's a monster.
That's
sitting on top of the hill.
I mean, it is vast.
But it's also it's a very beautiful building. It's because Hawksmoor designed the majority of it.
Yes.
Hawksmoor is probably the most underrated architect this country ever produced. I mean, he's started to be appreciated much more now.
Yes, he is.
But this is pure Hawksmoor. I mean, for instance, he spent God knows how long trying to work out whether it should be an arcade, so a series of arches, or a colonnade, a series of columns. And he wanted it to be an arcade, but it's too big to have an arcade on it with the right number of arches.
Right.
So he rather sadly decided to make it into a colonnade. I mean, sadly as far as he was concerned. But it has an extraordinary beauty to it.
It certainly does. I mean, it's absolutely vast. But the view, of course, is phenomenal, spectacular. I mean,
well, that is the view.
Yes.
And I get that in reverse every morning at breakfast. So every morning I'm looking at the place I'm going to be buried, which I rather like. I really do rather like. It has sort of satisfaction to it.
No, it does. But the history around this was built.
This was built when Carlyle set out to build Castle Howard, Third of Carlyle. He always intended that it should be as much about the surrounding countryside, the land, the buildings, as about the single building itself. So they represented a collection of buildings, so that it became a sort of thing in a landscape, rather than just a building plonked on a hill.
Right.
And when they got about 2/3 through the building of the house, he said to Vanbrugh and Hawksmoor, right, stop, I want to get on with the outside, because otherwise it'll never happen.
Right.
So Vanbrugh designed the temple.
Yes.
Temple of the Four Winds. It's just past those trees there. And Hawksmoor designed the Mausoleum.
And the third Earl built this to show off, of course, his...
Well, the whole thing is showing off.
The whole thing's showing off his power. But he did want to be buried here.
He wants to be buried here. And do you know, I mean, normally you'd say that having a great mausoleum would be the height of arrogance, but I think, frankly, he deserves it. For creating all that, he's allowed his own memorial. It's pretty incredible. He didn't go into it initially. He wasn't finished by the time he died.
Right.
And he was initially buried in the village of Welburn, which is over there.
Okay.
And then once the mausoleum was finished, he was disinterred and brought up here.
And brought up here. Okay, fantastic. Right. And can we go inside?
We can indeed.
Oh, absolutely brilliant.
And we get into real Hawksmoor when we get inside. Do you see here those iron cramps?
Yes,
That's
I do.
what's pulling the building apart. When iron gets rusts, it can take up to 7 times the volume of rusty iron, 7 times the volume of ordinary stone. So, I mean, this needs alone about 10 million spending on it. The chap. This is actually a consecrated chapel, but there is no Christian symbolism in it anywhere.
Really?
Which is kind of indicative of the thinking at that time. But it's Hawksmoor at its finest.
Yes.
And, you know, it's full of little details. And most people, if they've been building something like this, there wouldn't have been many people building something like this.
No, of course
but
not.
usually you would have had half columns going up.
Okay.
But Hawksmoor insisted, and Carlisle was happy with it, that there were full columns in recesses. And it just gives that sense of weight rather more.
Yes.
But I mean, it is the most beautiful scene with all those different flowers in it.
It's extraordinary. It's just exquisite.
I mean, even though it is this very grand and sort of imposing thing, it does give a sense of calm and peace just sitting here.
It does. As I just sort of, take my eyes from one spot to the next. There's so much to look at, so much to take in, but you do feel this real sense of peace from within. And the family then is buried here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of generations that haven't been buried here. Rosalyn and George, now Countess, are buried up at Naworth.
Okay.
And my grandparents, Geoffrey and Kitty, are buried just in the village graveyard in Cunnisthorpe. Which I think probably was because I think he always probably felt a little bit strange about having inherited it. And probably thought it'd be a bit grand to put himself in here. By the time we got to my father's generation, he was having none of that. So he's in here, my 2 aunts are in here, and now 2 of my brothers are in here, and I'll be in here.
Yes. Wow. But the upkeep of this, though, Nick, is quite extensive.
I mean, we have a huge conservation deficit, so what we need to spend on conserving what's here, I mean, the total is about 50 million. But this alone is probably 10 to 15 million. They thought it would be very clever to strengthen it by putting iron cramps between the stones, which is fine when everything's dry, but when iron gets wet and turns to iron oxide, rust, it can occupy up to 7 times the volume, so it just rips the stone apart. And actually, just outside the door here, there's a new bit that had come off.
And it's all the way up?
All the way up.
All the way up.
And we don't even know, it's likely that there's a chain of some sort going around the dome, because domes naturally push outwards.
Yes.
And Hawksmoor knew this because he worked with Wren on St Paul's.
Yeah.
And St Paul's has got 2 great chains around it, so it's quite likely that somewhere embedded in the stone up there is a chain.
Would you have to look at every single...
We'd have to look at the entire fabric of it. And we can do little bits and pieces of work on it. So we've stopped the damp getting in down below. I'll take you down below in a minute, and you'll see what the effects of the damp were there. And, I can point out the negative aspects of it, but the real point is that it is still standing, and it is one of the most beautiful buildings in England. It's extraordinary.
It is absolutely extraordinary, and just wonderful to see it in all its glory. The Mausoleum really is the most spectacular building. Rising 90 feet high, it has stood proud in the landscape for nearly 300 years. It has the most peaceful, beautiful atmosphere, especially in the private family crypt. Oh my goodness, it's very atmospheric.
It's atmospheric, it's not scary.
No, it's not.
I've never found this crypt
No.
scary.
It's quite light, and as in, what I mean by that is there's not a sort of a heaviness within it.
And if the sun is shining, there's always a shaft of light coming through one of these windows.
Wonderful.
Which is rather lovely. But what there are also are these rooms going around, which have each got slots in them. And there's still lots of room left.
Oh, is there? Okay, well I can see there's one there.
Yeah, that one's empty. That's my brother Henry.
Okay.
That's my aunt Christian.
Right.
My parents are around the corner. My grandparents, I say, are down at the cemetery in Candisthorpe. My great-grandparents are in Naworth. And then it comes back to great-greats and all the way back to the third Earl.
All the way back. And can I see the third Earl?
Indeed you can. We'll need to find some additional light to put onto the wall. But I think probably our phones will be enough. There he is.
There he is.
There he is, the third Earl of Carlisle.
And he was the first one here.
He was the first one here. Yeah, he was. It wasn't quite finished, as I said, by the time he died. So he was temporarily put into. Which one is that?
Brilliant. So that's the second son.
Yeah, it's the second son. Yeah.
Of the third Earl.
Yes,
okay.
that's right.
Yes. Yes.
And then we move around, and if you come in here now, you can see what I mean by these little rooms.
No.
Here it was a square.
Oh my goodness.
But the damp, which we've now arrested, has meant that there's been terrible damage to these. They've started to delaminate, which is slightly scary.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we do know who to each. I suppose we could.
This is absolutely
recarved them, but
brilliant.
my parents,
Oh, lovely.
father, my mother.
Lovely, lovely. Really lovely.
It's a little bit like touring a picture gallery.
It is.
Now, this one is the first completely empty room.
Ah.
And you can see that there are all these spaces still left.
Yes, there are. Well, wonderful. Thank you. As Nick mentioned, the mausoleum is one of the greatest conservation challenges at Castle Howard. You were talking earlier about, as we look at this restoration project. So will this happen, do you think, in your lifetime? Would you like it to
I'm
happen?
determined to get something happening before I put my clogs.
Right.
That needs dealing with as well. Every time I come up here with something new, this has come away from the wall.
Yes, because you have that eye that, when you walk into a room, the first thing as a...
You notice change.
Exactly.
You notice change.
Yeah, but it is. I mean, this is exquisite. It's absolutely beautiful. What a real privilege for me to be here.
And of course, the place was chosen very carefully. I think it's the highest hill kind of around.
Right.
So you've got the most amazing views out.
Yeah, amazing 360 views.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. Every historic house faces day-to-day challenges to maintain and preserve these glorious buildings for the future. And Castle Howard is no exception. Restoration projects are always ongoing. I met up with Stephanie Halstead, head of built environment at Castle Howard, to see a project which has presented its own set of challenges.
So this is one of our wall garden gate piers. It's on the Heritage at Risk register,
Right.
As the wall garden as a whole. And unfortunately, this particular pier got hit by a delivery vehicle a couple of years ago now. And what happened was it just clipped the edge of one of the stones, which caused it to rotate and fracture. And so our architect undertook a survey and actually determined that the damage was quite substantial, whilst aesthetically it didn't look like that.
Right.
So we've had to gain listed building consent to fully dismantle the pier and then rebuild it. We found that most of the stones couldn't be reused because they were poor quality, they'd deteriorated in condition quite a bit. Fundamentally, the design of the pier was flawed in how it was constructed, so we've had to do some improvements to that. So it's been a very long drawn out process where our masons have had to carefully dismantle stone by stone, record it. There's been a lot of geometry going on back at their yard to work out the correct way to rebuild and form the pier.
Right.
And then they've had to bring all of that stone back, 18 tons worth of stone.
Oh my goodness.
To then rebuild it.
Well, since I'm dressed like this, can we go up and see it?
Absolutely, let's take a look.
Okay, let's go. Wow, that is quite a structure.
I know,
So
isn't
this
it?
had to be completely rebuilt.
Yep, so it's fully dismantled down to the lower courses because the damage was so great, and then it's had to be essentially rebuilt from the ground up. You can see where we've been able to reuse some of the original stones.
Oh, yes.
Unfortunately, there's not that many surviving just because they're deteriorated so much.
So from start to finish, this project, how long has it taken?
So the original damage happened in 2021. We then also had to get listed building consent because it was quite a big intervention to make to
Right.
be using so much new stone. You know, this is one of many piers, and I think this hopefully marks the start of us being able to do something further with the remainder of the wall garden.
Yes.
As you're aware, we have a massive conservation challenge here. So many parts of our estate need our attention, and in a way we were quite fortunate that this incident happened because it's enabled us to provide some focus.
Yes.
And also it's taught us a lot. We now know how the other piers have been constructed, and it means that we will go into any future pier restorations kind of fully informed with a plan in place,
Yes.
knowing how long it's going to take and also how much it's going to cost.
Yes, yes, exactly. And cost is the big one. You know, I think when somebody looks at this, they don't really appreciate how much time, effort, and money has to be spent on a structure like this.
Yeah,
which looks
absolutely.
quite simple to the eye, but so much detail.
Yeah, and it takes up a tiny space. So
That's
you wouldn't
right.
think
Yes,
it was
exactly,
a big project.
exactly.
And I mean, for me as well, it's about keeping the heritage skills alive, because without the craftsmen who can recreate these structures, we're going to be lost in the future.
Yes.
And you know, we're really keen to make sure that we do keep that skill set alive.
Yeah. You know, you've got enormous Castle Howard, vast, but these equally are just as important.
Absolutely.
Just as they're part of the fabric of the entire estate.
They are, and if we don't preserve them, we'll lose them. So it's crucial that we continue to plough our income from visitors, from our wider estate into these conservation projects.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you, Steph.
No problem.
Wow, what a treat to be able to see this. I hope you're going to have some sort of party or something, celebration, right?
I think we need to.
Yeah,
definitely.
you absolutely need to. And there must have been quite a celebration when construction on Castle Howard was finally completed at the beginning of the 19th century. It had taken over 100 years to build. Dr. Christopher Ridgway explained more about Vanbragh's original vision for the building.
The house is begun in 1699 with the east wing and moves in this westerly direction, so from left to right as we're looking at it.
Yep.
East wing, central block, great crowning dome, unique. No private house in England had ever been built with one of those before. 3/4 finished, and suddenly the house doesn't get built anymore, because by 1715 the men were throwing all their energy into designing the landscape around here. So the complementarity of the 18th century house and the 18th century design landscape, really crucial to understand them together.
Right.
And that means it's not until the 1750s that the west wing is built, to a different architectural style.
Oh my!
So the original vision is only partially completed with 2 wings, but they don't match in any way.
But they don't match. Oh my goodness! And you have to really look at it to see that they don't match, because when you arrive, you
think, yeah.
You think that this was all built at the same time.
And there's an engraving showing how it should be, but it doesn't correspond with what you see today. And today it's a hybrid, but I think it's all the more interesting because of that kind of quirkiness. There's only 2 things you need to enjoy Castle Howard. One is an open mind, curiosity. The other thing, open eyes.
Yes.
And then you can enjoy whatever you see.
Exactly. Well, there's lots of visitors here today.
Here they come.
And they are definitely enjoying Castle Howard.
There's so much to Castle Howard. I mean, one early visitor in the 18th century described it as not one single place, as 10 different places with the house, the lakes, the gardens, the woodlands. And it is that multiplicity, all from that early period, that makes it so rich and endlessly stimulating. There's an infinity of things to learn here.
Absolutely, and that's what makes these historic houses so special.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with that visitor in the 18th century. There is so much to see at Castle Howard. Jasper Hassel, Estate Chief Executive, is developing new ways of enhancing the visitor experience in the surrounding landscape. We headed out to visit some of the monuments, which, like the Mausoleum, were designed by Hawksmoor and Vanbrugh in the 1720s.
I think the focus is always the house and the grounds, and that's the obvious attraction, and we get 250,000 visitors a year that come to see that. But there is so much more outside the house and the grounds, and people sometimes don't realise that. They can see them in the distance, these various monuments that we're going to go and visit, but actually getting up close and personal to them, understanding why they're there, they're visitor attractions in their own right. So we're trying to widen the appreciation of why people should come to see the house and the grounds and the surrounding estate. And we're fortunate we have a lot of public rights of way across the estate. We're a very open estate in terms of access, so people can go and see these. It's just sort of getting them out there and making them realise they're there.
Right, exactly. So where are we heading to now?
So we're looking at the old parkland, which is the old deer park of the estate, and this is right in front of the house. It would have been surrounded by a 7-mile wall back in the day. That doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. So we're going to drive along through the park, and we'll go past these follies on the way, but like the pyramid you can see here on the right hand side.
Yes.
So it would have been inspired by the sort of, you know, the Grand Tour and going through Europe and North Africa and seeing these things and sort of coming back and saying, well, actually I want one of those in my back garden, which effectively this would have been.
Right, which side, Jasper?
Well, which direction?
Pyramid.
So the house is here, and that's the south side of the house. So the gardens, you would have walked around, and as you walk up and down the terrace on the south side, these monuments would kind of pop in and out of view in a kind of a theatrical way. You know, you sort of lose sight of one, and another one emerges behind the trees, or behind the hill. And so what they've done is they've taken natural points in the landscape. They haven't built that hill up. They haven't built the hill up over there. They've taken those natural points, and they've put these monuments on them. Interestingly, they are sort of on a radius of the pyramid. And this is a pyramid. It is hollow inside. There's a bust of one of the ancestors inside. It's not open to the public, and that's where we're working on an application which I can talk to you a bit more about, that kind of brings these things to life. So you'll be able to click on the app, and it'll show you what's inside the pyramid, because you can't actually go right up to that and go inside it at the moment, but it will allow you to do that virtually from here, and you can walk around it in a sort of augmented reality way. So that's about sort of opening up these places, because you can walk down this road. This is a public right of way, but you might just walk past that and do exactly what is that? Why is it there?
So now it's almost like an immersive experience. Yeah. I'm taking a walk, I see this in the distance, and I think, what the heck is this pyramid doing? I'm able to look at the app and find out more information.
I mean, should we put it on the bonnet of the car?
Yeah.
I'll see if it can work.
Okay.
I'll get this I've got a little piece of paper that sort of activates it.
Okay, fantastic.
So the idea is this would be like a QR code. This could be anywhere. This could be on a little post there.
Exactly.
Or we're actually developing a way that you get within a certain georeference and then it activates. So you kind of have to be within a spot and then you can see it.
Right.
So so I'd click on my app and I'd open it up. I'd point it. There it is. See?
Oh my gosh! There's the pyramid.
It's on the bonnet of the car.
It is on the bonnet of the car, but I can see it very up close and personal.
Well, you can even see the lichen on the stones.
Yes, you can.
And then if I walk around it, I can see the other side.
Oh my goodness!
And I can go up. I can see the top of it, and then we've got a thing. We're going to have a little dropout, and you click it, and it shows you a three-dimensional bust of what's inside, the statue effectively that's inside. And we've done one of the mausoleum as well. I'll just show you that, just because you've been to there.
Yeah,
again,
so I'll hold
if you hold that, this is our sort of beta testing, so apologies. There it is. See the
There's
mausoleum,
a mausoleum
on the bonnet of the car.
Oh my goodness!
And again, you can kind of go over
Zoom
the top
around
as you move around.
And then I can hit information,
hit
as well.
information.
So again, another Hawksmoor creation. So his spectacular mausoleum. And it says in the 1720s, again, it was the 3rd Earl of Carlisle who was determined to build this. And that's fantastic. So rather than, it's almost like I'm on an immersive experience walk, which is highly educational.
Yeah, and you don't need sort of garish information boards everywhere.
It's fantastic.
So it gives you maybe a bit of purpose to your amble through the estate.
Great, so where are we off to next?
We're going to go to New River Bridge, which is that bridge down there, and then we'll probably go up to the Temple of the Four Winds, which is a beautiful folly designed by Vanbrugh, and it was sort of a summer house, a place where they would have embarked on their kind of parkland adventures.
Right.
On their horses and things.
Fantastic. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Stunning.
Yeah.
I mean, stunning, stunning, stunning. Look at this. Oh, it's so beautiful.
So this is New River.
Right.
Because it was a new river. It was designed into the landscape. It cascades down from the lakes in the south side of the house.
Right.
And then it's dammed at various points to create this river-like feature. And then you've got the Temple of the Four Winds, which is...
So tell me about that, because I've passed that. I've seen the mausoleum.
Yeah, the mausoleum.
Yeah, fantastic. But Temple of Four Winds...
So that's a much more positive place than the mausoleum. That's probably the location for lots of summer garden parties. It was probably the starting point for lots of adventures in around the estate. You can imagine their horses being brought up here, and then they go off hunting or riding across the estate. It's quite a distance from the main house. It would have been that sort of summer folly, summer house,
yes. And is it still used today?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Special events, so yeah, it is still used. Yeah.
But again, this was built by the 3rd Earl, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, and Vanbrugh designed as well. So we'll go up there and take a closer look.
At the Temple of the Four Winds, we carried out another test of the new Visitor Experience app, which is in development.
So we've come to this viewing point, and there's nothing here, but there is something here, digitally.
Yes.
And then we launch the AR, and we hold the phone up, and
oh my goodness!
So now there's an information point there, and I can click on
that.
Click on that.
There we go.
Vanbragh's Temple. There we go. And then it gives me some pictures of it in the past.
Yes.
And then I can scroll down, and it gives me the information about it, what it was built for.
And then you can find out so much more information, but also it includes sort of pictures, sort of now and then. So this is fantastic. It's a real immersive experience.
Yeah, it is. It's immersive. It becomes a virtual tour guide. It's on your device.
Wonderful, because I think that it's when you come out onto the wider landscape, having the accessibility here, you might think, ooh, I can't access it. We've just accessed that perfectly. And being able to learn.
Yeah, it's really important, and there's so much learning here, like you said, and it might be about history, it might be about the built environment, heritage, it can be about the natural environment, it can be about farming.
Yes.
So it becomes an educational experience.
Well done. I'm excited to download the app.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jasper.
We've got a cow looking longingly at our car. We should probably
We do.
get back in before it gets licked to death.
Well, yes, I have a fear of cows, Jasper, so I'm a bit nervous.
Well,
At least my door is on this side, the passenger
Yeah,
is on
exactly,
this side.
exactly. We'll get back in and we'll cruise down
Okay, fantastic.
back over the bridge.
The ongoing work to expand the visitor experience both within the house and across the estate at Castle Howard is so inspiring. The reality of living in and managing historic houses has changed dramatically over the past 100 years or so. And thank goodness, the role of women in these houses has changed beyond recognition. Eleanor Brooke Peet, curator of collections and archives at Castle Howard, has studied the lives of 3 women in the Howard family, 3 countesses of Carlisle, who each in different ways made a huge impact. These books that you've taken out of the archives today, they are from one of those strong women, aren't they?
Yeah, so she's one of my favourites. This is Isabella, and she was the second wife of the 4th Earl of Carlisle.
Right.
And they marry in 1743. His first wife had passed away sadly, as had his heirs, and so he was, was quite eager to remarry and to hopefully have another male heir. So he marries Isabella, but she's a good 20 years his younger. We don't have much in the archive surviving in terms of her correspondence, but we do have these 2 documents which really give a bit of an insight into what her life was like and what was she doing at Castle Howard. These are her household accounts, and she starts this in the year after she marries, so 1744, and we can see here her manuscript. I, Carlisle, her book, an abstract of the house accounts. And she explains here that it's an account of the household expense during the times that they're both at Castle Howard and when they're away. And in the first few pages, she's listing all of the things that the household is spending its money on.
Right.
So from the wines that are being stocked, the beers, the meats that are brought in to feed the table. And after a few pages, it goes on for several years, it's clear she gets the idea of what she's doing. But in these first few pages, you get this sense of a young woman who's been thrust into the world of being a chatelaine, so being the head of the female head of the household, and what that role entails.
Yes, fantastic. And so this, how many years does this?
This runs up to about 1758, which is when the 4th Earl sadly passes away. So it encompasses her time here as Countess of Carlisle.
The Earl of Carlisle, her husband, dies in 1758. So how long was the marriage then?
About 15 years.
About 15 years, so not that long, but did she produce an heir?
She certainly did.
Right,
So
she did, okay. So she did her duty, which is back then was obviously very important to be able to pass on. Luckily, times have hopefully changed since then, but I know that there was, of course, that enormous pressure to be able, during that period, to be able to produce an heir so that the heir could then take on, again, historic houses like Castle Howard.
It is, and you get a real sense, because she produces a couple of girls initially, before she finally produces the future 5th Earl, and you get a sense from everything else that she's doing during this time that the pressure was off then. She's produced the heir, she can now crack on with other things that she's interested in, such as redecoration and buying, sort of lovely things like porcelain, adding those to the collection.
Right, and then after the death of the 4th Earl, what happened to Isabel?
Well, Well, she ends up marrying again pretty quickly, which is a surprise. There's a lot of commentary at the time where people are admiring her as a very beautiful widow and very full of the joys of life. So she's clearly enjoying her widowhood, spending a lot of time in London. But within a year, she's remarried to Sir William Musgrave.
Okay. Does she stay here?
I think Castle Howard still remains her home. She, of course, still has her children. Her son, the future 5th Earl, is very young. He's only 10 years old when his father dies. And so the house essentially goes into trusteeship. So she still uses it as a home, but her focus obviously turns a bit further out to the rest of the world. Now, she makes this marriage. It turns out to be quite an unwise one. They're very ill-suited in terms of their temperament. She's very outgoing and wants to, enjoy life, whereas Musgrave was a bit more shy and retiring. We're not entirely sure what attracted them in the first place.
Opposites attract, maybe? I don't know, but yes, yeah.
Unfortunately, it turned out to not be one that lasted, and within 10 years, their marriage has effectively broken down, and Isabella ends up taking herself off to the continent.
And then this book to my left.
Yeah, so this is known as Isabella's recipe book. And on the front we see my book of receipts, which is a way of saying recipes.
Recipes, I know. I do love that word. I hope it comes back in fashion.
Yeah, you should just start it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And it's a really fascinating book. We think that she probably keeps this as a sort of a journal throughout her life. There's no dating within it. But it was likely started while she was still here at Castle Howard, and then she writes in French in some of the passages, so it probably continues when she's on the continent as well. But when we say recipes, that's very much, it's not just in the modern sense of recipe, if you think of a recipe for a meal, but it's also recipes for medicines. And so quite often when people were relying upon home remedies to be able to solve problems that they have. But then there are also recipes or notes relating to the household as well. So again, you get this insight, much like through the household accounts, you get this insight into what was she as a chatelaine thinking about. But to show you some of my favourite recipes, so we have here some of the medicinal ones. So you have your everyday ones, so a receipt for a cold.
Fantastic. There's snail water there, is that right?
Snail water? I'm not sure what snail water is for.
It literally says, take a gallon of milk and 100 of snails, then wash them very clean and house them. I think that says house them. Bruise them, well done. Then put them into the milk and let them just boil up, do we think? Yeah. Then then put them into a still, and to every still put one good handful of something mint.
Spearmint, perhaps.
Yeah, spearmint, and one handful of something hood.
Something like that.
Something like that. Must be an herb of some sort.
But then there are no instructions for what to do with it afterwards. And what are you using it for?
What is that for? Is that right? What is that for?
It's a mystery. One assumes that because there are no instructions about what to do with it next, that it must have been quite obvious what to do with it next.
Fantastic.
But then you also have for the lips, here you have essentially what's like a lip balm.
Yes.
And a cold. These things have never really changed. We all have these same illnesses today and need remedies for them. So that's essentially what they're dealing with.
This is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. How fun just to go through this.
Now, if we go here, so onto our food recipes here, and it's a really interesting insight into the way that people were eating during the mid to late 18th century. All the way through here, you have a lot of preserving.
Yes,
So it's taking fruits of the seasons or anything that's available and making sure that you're going to be able to fill that hunger gap during the winter and enjoy things out of season as well. So when we move through, we can see there's lots of things that are very very approachable. So you have a marmalade of quinces. You have little queen's cakes here.
Yes, lovely.
And many of these recipes are, so we've got gingerbread as well.
Yeah.
You could read that today and you could probably reproduce that.
Yes. I do love this last one, to make cowslip wine.
There are about 5 recipes for cowslip wine in here. I can't even imagine what it tastes like, but it must have been delicious.
It must have been delicious. So thank you so much, Eleanor. And then there's a couple more strong women here that you really do focus on as well, aren't there?
There are. So Georgiana, who was the 6th Countess and joined the family around about 1801. She marries the future 6th Earl of Carlisle and comes to live at Castle Howard. And her bedroom still exists here and is still named after her even today. Right. So she had a huge impact on the family. And then more recently, Rosalyn's the 9th Countess, who's running the house from about 1880 to 1920.
Oh my goodness. It was so interesting to see Countess Isabella's book of receipts. And it reminds me of how in my own family, Alberta, the 9th Countess of Sandwich, kept all of her recipes. And recently, I've started testing them out in the kitchen, so I couldn't help but make a little request while I was at Castle Howard. I met up with Nick Howard in the private family kitchen, where he had been cooking up something rather special. So we're in your lovely kitchen, and you have recipe books surrounding you, because I had a little request, didn't I, before I came to film with you?
You did indeed. You asked me to get out Isabella, 4th Countess of Carlisle's recipe book, and I've got it. This is it all transcribed, so just more easily legible.
Yes.
Most of the recipes in here, I don't think I'd like to eat, so I'm not going to try and cook them. I mean, beef cooked for 7 hours is probably not to modern taste. And I'm not quite sure I'd find a calf's head to soak in vinegar for 7 days. So,
right, well, I'm vegetarian, so that works out really well for me.
That's perfect. So what I've found is what we would call a syllabub now, but she calls a sidibub.
Okay.
Which is reasonably amusing. And I thought that before I launched into it, I'd check with a few contemporary recipe books and see what they said about it. And quite reassuringly, the recipes are almost exactly the same, except that hers sounds slightly more delicious.
Oh, fantastic. And you sure you're not biased?
I'm sure I'm not biased. The one thing that I did get from all of them was that I probably shouldn't be using an electric mixer for it, because otherwise it would curdle. So I'm afraid I did it earlier. Here's one I did earlier.
Right, but you were...
I was whisking away by hand.
So, but explain to me, what is a syllabub?
Because a syllabub is really...
As an American, I'm not sure we have that.
It's cream, sugar, lemon, and in this case, white wine, and what she asked for sack, but you can't actually get sack anymore. It's effectively sherry. It's a fortified wine.
I'm just looking here. Does she put quantities in?
Yep.
Because sometimes they don't.
All the quantities in this book are for really quite large amounts. So this one, she never says how many it's for, but this one asks for a pint of cream, half a pound of double refined sugar beaten, because of course they couldn't just go out and buy caster sugar in those days.
That's right.
Sugar came in lumps, so this was beaten.
Yes, you had to beaten it up. Oh my goodness.
The juice of 1 lemon and half the rind of the same grated, half a pint of white wine, a quarter of a pint of sack. That's the sack I was talking about. Then she says, mix them in an earthen pan, which I'm afraid I didn't use. I used a glass bowl, with a little whisk. I had the little whisk here, in which beat it about quarter of an hour, then put into glasses. And that's pretty much what I did, having, as I say, checked through with the contemporary recipes to make sure this is going to work.
Fantastic.
To my palate, it's come out really well.
Right. Well, I'm really excited to
have a go.
Have a go.
Shall we each have one? Here, can I offer you a spoon?
Okay, thank you.
There we are.
All right. Okay, there's a little wine in here too. Fantastic. That is absolutely delicious.
Isn't it?
I can taste the little bit of the wine, which I was hoping to taste.
But it doesn't.
But it's not overpowered. No.
The texture, taste. It's yummy, isn't it?
You've done a fine job, Nick.
Well, I surprised myself.
Yeah, I mean, this is your next dinner party pudding, absolutely.
Well, I think it probably will be, actually.
Yeah, it's brilliant. My goodness, this is wonderful. I'm going to have to take that recipe.
You certainly have it.
In the west wing of the house, I met up with Eleanor to hear more about Lady Georgiana, the 6th Countess of Carlisle, and her legacy to the Howard family.
So this is Lady Georgiana's bedroom.
Tremendous, beautiful. Oh my goodness. And this is the bedroom as it was, is that right?
Well, it's not far
from it.
As it would have originally been, but certainly the bed has been here since Lady Georgiana used this room.
Right.
And it's likely this was her bedroom ever since she first moved into the house. She married the future 6th Earl of Carlisle in 1801, and they move in here essentially with his parents. So the 5th Earl and Countess are living in the east wing of the house, which has always been the family wing. And this is a relatively newly created suite of rooms in the west wing. You know, the west wing had only been completed towards the end of the 18th century. These rooms have been fitted up, and they use these as their private suite.
I see. How wonderful. So this is Georgiana. Now tell me a little bit about her background, because she did come from quite a significant family, is that right?
She did. So her parents were the 5th Duke and Duchess of Devonshire. You know, and there's been a very famous book and a film about them. They had quite an exciting lifestyle and were very much the centre of fashionable life of the ton, or in London. And she was their eldest daughter. She's also known as Little G. For much of her life. And she's actually very different to her parents. You know, her mother, the Duchess of Devonshire, is known as a great beauty and socialite.
Yes.
You know, really outgoing. Little G seems to have reacted slightly against that and becomes quite a quiet, withdrawn young lady, quite pious, but hugely intelligent and interested in the world around her, particularly in politics. She ends up meeting her husband, the future 6th Earl of Carlisle, and whilst it was, you know, it turns out to be a great love marriage, it is also, you know, a great political alliance as well between two of the big families of the time, you know, uniting Chatsworth and Castle Howard, you know, two of the significant houses and families in the country together.
Yes, absolutely. And was she a beauty like her mother as well?
I'm not sure she was really, and we don't actually have very many, you know, likenesses of her surviving. You know, particularly of her as a younger woman.
Right.
We have surviving in this room one of her at one end of her life. So this is her as a great matriarch.
Yes.
You know, really sort of seen here in her widow's weeds. It's painted in the 1850s, following the death of her husband. And, you know, she at this point really is the head of a large family. So she and the 6th Earl have 12 children together, which, you know, is a huge family. And quite often people would have these big families because sadly some children wouldn't survive infancy. You know, infant mortality was sadly quite high. But all 12 of their children survive, and all of them go on to make, you know, really good marriages. So, you know, that essentially is her role, is to produce these children, but then also make sure that they marry well, and you have this enormous extended family. We have a huge archive still surviving of her correspondence with her extended family, particularly still with her mother and with her sister as well. So she's very involved in the life of her family around her.
Right.
And we get a lot about what are her interests. You know, she was a great musician. She loved writing and playing music. She's also interested in politics, so she spent a lot of time in London with her husband, who was a politician.
Yes.
You know, visiting the House of Commons and really entrenching herself in that life. And she's a very learned woman as well.
Yeah.
So she's a really interesting sort of beacon of what a woman could be at that time.
It's really fascinating for me to hear how these women were such strong characters of their time and how each left their own mark on the history of Castle Howard. Rosalyn Stanley married George Howard, the future 9th Earl of Carlisle, in 1865. She was a campaigner for the temperance movement and cheerleader for women's suffrage. But at Castle Howard, she took on the estate management as well as transforming much of the interior decoration. this room is all about the 9th Countess, is that right?
It is, Rosalind, and can't really overstate the amount of impact she had on Castle Howard in many different ways, but particularly on its decorative history.
Right. And is it fair to say that the wallpaper here is her? I mean, and she was kind of everywhere with wallpaper. Is that right?
It is. And wallpaper's something, you know, she really used wallpaper throughout the house. Now, we know wallpapers are being used at Castle Howard as a form of decoration since the very earliest days. But by the time you get into the later 19th century, it's no longer a preserve of the very wealthy. It's become much more ubiquitous.
Right.
And it's very fashionable to use it. When she and the Ninth Earl, her husband, move in here in 1880, they find a house that is perhaps a little bit tired. They comment that they really need to make things shipshape.
Right.
And improve the appearance of the place, and she really chooses wallpaper to do that with. So over the next 20 years we see an enormous amount of change through pretty much every single interior of the house. Rosalyn sets out initially with her interest in the Orient, so particularly Japan. There's a great craze for Japanese furnishings and decoration during the second half of the 19th century, and she's very much into that. And so in the first 10 years or so of them being at Castle Howard, we see an awful lot of Japanese wallpapers being used. And the one that we have here in the Archbishop's bedroom is one of the ones that survives. And this is an incredible wallpaper. You know, it really hits you in the face when it comes through the room, and it's still, even 140 years after it was installed, it still has that amazing impact. But we also have a huge collection of wallpapers in store here. So we have surviving papers on the walls, which is a wonderful thing, but we also have them in store left over from all of her decoration projects. Right. And so we have here a roll of this wallpaper, the goose paper.
Oh my goodness.
And this shows us you know, the original colours of the paper. Now you think this has been on the walls for 140 years. Whilst this is quite a dark room, it has of course faded from light damage. It's you know, it's collected sort of pollution on the surface from open fires. And the colours have changed quite radically, and you've lost particular colours like these lighter greens and the yellows and the purples, and the pinks have faded away. So it's amazing to be able to hold this up against the original
It is,
wallpaper.
because of course this is much more vibrant, but it has been stored away for 140 years. But when you see this, just like this, you can imagine what it was like coming in here and having this sort of wonderful, bright wallpaper, and really cheery. It's very cheery.
It is, and I think she chose this very purposely, because this is quite a dark room. We're east facing here, so you don't get a lot of direct sunlight during the day. So she's purposely chosen this really rich and vibrant wallpaper to brighten up the room. And also, if you look very closely, you can just see sort of sparkling on the surface there. It's a graphite or a mica layer that's been included over the top, which again, you know, if you've got candlelight or the light of the fire, it would catch those little sparkles and again help to bring an element of brightness to the room.
And then here, my eye was brought to the attention of Castle Howard wallpapers.
Yes, so this is an amazing document that survives in the archive. This is a notebook that Rosalind starts in 1905, and she's literally listing all of the elements of the house, such as wallpapers, fabrics, beds, mattresses, toilet services, you name it, she's listed it in here.
So she really was, in one sense, what we would call an interior designer in today's terms.
Yeah, and she's thinking about things very holistically about the house. It's all being brought in. But the most important page, to my mind, is this, which lists all of the wallpapers around the house, and she's listed all of the rooms, the type of wallpaper that they have in there, and then also notes about how much is left over and what they have in store. Now, some of these are you know, sort of, we help to connect to wallpapers that are still on the walls. So we can see down here we have West Wing, Japanese paper, Wild Goose. So that's where we are at the moment.
And she even lists sort of the pieces: 1 piece, 3 piece, 3 pieces of 24 yards, 1 piece, 6 rolls. I mean, it's really meticulous. But I also have spotted Morris.
Yes. So William Morris is her other great love.
Right.
So from after her Japanese phase, we start to see William Morris designed wallpapers sneaking into Castle Howard. And this background relationship with William Morris comes partly from their close friendship with him. So Rosalind and her husband George were good friends with both William Morris and other members of the arts and crafts movement and the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood as well. And
fantastic.
you get a sense from this list here just how many different Morris papers are being used. For example, in the Long Gallery, that was decorated in a red sunflower paper. So completely transformed the space. And it took 170 rolls to be able to do that work. But surprisingly, none of that survives in the archive. Although recently, when we were pulled out one of the bookcases, we were able to find these small scraps hidden behind a bookcase. So this is all that we have remaining of that very particular point in the decorative history of the Long Gallery. But still, an amazing survival.
Yes, amazing survival. And just to be able to see that the red sunflower right there.
Over here on the right-hand side, we have a picture of the music room, looking very different to how it looks now. And we can see in this black and white image, it's a very heavy wallpaper that you can see on the walls. But you can also see where the light touches it down the side that it's got a good shine to it. Now, when you look really closely at this with a magnifying glass, you can make out that there is the pattern there, and that pattern matches in with this wallpaper. Now we have, this is an amazing green and gold wallpaper with this incredible, foliar and cherub pattern on it. And we have huge numbers of rolls of this paper still surviving in the archive. And it was there up until the fire, we think, in 1940. The music room is next door to the last room that was damaged directly by fire. If you think there's a fire raging next door, there's going to be a lot of water coming into the house. So some of the rolls that we have surviving in the archive do have water damage on them. So they were clearly stripped out immediately following the fire, and good old Castle Howard fashion got wrapped up and put into store. So we're incredibly fortunate.
Oh my gosh,
that
yes
was
you
done.
are. It's absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Eleanor, for sharing these three strong women and their stories here at Castle Howard. And it must be just wonderful to be able to continue to research them, but see them and the legacy that they've left all around Castle Howard.
No, it is absolutely. I mean, sort of Isabella, Georgiana and Rosalind, they're such strong personalities and have impacted on the house in all of their different ways. And, it's so often we talk about the men of the house and the things that they're doing, which might be more outwardly preserved around us, but the impact of women should never be overlooked in the history of the house. They're keeping things running in the background, and they always have their own interests and their own impacts, but it's a story that is still worth, very much focusing on.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. What an absolute joy to visit Castle Howard. It was so amazing to step inside its history. From the restoration following the devastating fire in 1940, to its legendary appearances on screen, the renewal of the interior decoration, together with the repairs needed to the buildings across the estate, and of course, the impact of Countesses Isabella, Georgiana, and Rosalind. It's been an absolutely fascinating journey, and I hope to return to Castle Howard once more. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you soon for more historic house visits. Until then, bye everybody!